to this troubleshooting video on your Mini Classic CT countertop water distiller. If you're losing production on your Mini Classic, it means one of two things is occurring. Either A, power is not getting into the machine enough to cause the boiling water to fully come over into your glass jar, or B, you're having a leak somewhere where water is leaking or steam is escaping, so again, it's not fully getting into your glass jar for production. How do you know when you're not getting enough water? You should be getting about 0.8 of a gallon of distilled water out of every batch, which means it should be right above the blue sticker here on your glass jar. So if you're getting lower than that, you know you're probably getting a production loss and you probably need to look into what's going on. First thing we'll have you check when you notice a loss of production is to make sure that your power cord is plugged fully into the machine. If you have any kind of loose connection or if it's pulled out slightly, you can have a loss of power, and that can mean that your boiling tank's not going to distill properly. Next thing I'll have you do is actually pull out your boiling tank itself. And you want to make sure that you're filling it to the proper level. So by removing this, you'll notice inside your boiling tank here is a little stud that allows your crossbar on your lid to secure to the rest of the boiling tank. That's also going to be your fill line. You want to make sure that water fills to the bottom of that stud, and that's how you know you're going to get a proper production rate because it's run off a timer. So after you've filled your boiling tank correctly, you'll put your lid back on. And again, you want to make sure that you have a good sealed connection with your lid. You don't want any gap around here because that's going to allow steam to escape instead of going into your cooling coil. So this is centered. I can tighten it like that, but you notice there's a giant hole here where steam can escape. So you really want to make sure that it's centered properly, and I can get it off. And you want to make sure that this whole gasket here has no rips, bumps, or tears in it, because again, that's going to allow steam to escape and a loss of production. So, we've got this centered on. We're going to push it back into our distiller, and you'll notice that on the side here, on the bottom, is a little blue sticker that indicates how far you need to push in your boiling tank. So, if the sticker is covered, like it is right now, you know that your boiling tank is not fully pressed in, it's not going to get a good electrical connection, and you're not going to get the right amount of water out of your distiller. So make sure that it's pushed in securely, just beyond the sticker so you can see it fully, and you know that you have a good electrical connection for your distiller. Now, a couple other things you'll want to check. Your steam tube right here. This is where your steam is going to come out and into your cooling coil. If you're losing steam here, it could mean that the black O-ring inside this hole has fallen out or been pushed out. If you shine a pen light in here, you'll be able to notice a black O-ring inlaid into a groove inside this tube. That's going to create a seal around the steam tube that's up in the corner over here. If you lose that, you could lose production through the steam not fully getting into your steam tube, so you want to make sure that that O-ring is in there. If it's not, that could be causing your loss of production. So, we push the boiling tank in. Next thing we want to check is where the water comes out of the cooling coil. Right up in here is going to be where the water is going to drip out. You want to make sure that there's no blockage up in there. It's usually really easy to check. All it needs is a visual cue. You'll also want to make sure that your filter tray has a filter inside of it that has been soaked in distilled water so that it's not going to be dry, because a dry filter can actually, before it's wet, can block these holes from allowing water to go through. So you get water spilled outside your jar instead of getting inside your jar. So a lot of times if you're noticing that the water is building up in here and not passing through these holes, it's probably that your filter is blocking them and you just need to shake it around, move it, re-soak it, whatever you need to do to make sure the water can pass through the filter into your glass jar. After that, you're still not getting the right production. What you can check is to make sure that your machine is running properly. If you notice when it's plugged in, and flipped on, and you start a cycle, you're going to hear the fan come on. The fan is the indication that power is getting into your distiller and that it's working properly. Fan's coming on. Next thing you want to check is your rate of time that it's running. The Mini Classic runs off an internal timer and should run for 3.5 hours to produce a batch. If it runs for a shorter amount of time, you're not going to get as much water into your glass jar. So that means you want to run a batch and you want a time to see when it shuts itself off. If it's running for the 3.5 hours, we know that cycle is running and the timer's working properly. After that, we'll have you run a boiling tank test. This is to determine whether your heating element is working. So again, you're going to pull out your boiling tank. Take the lid off of it. You'll make sure it's filled with water. Then what you're going to do is take your power cord out of the back of your machine and you're going to plug it directly into your heating element. What this is going to do is put power directly into your heating element so that we can see if the heating element will bring the water to a boil like it's supposed to. You'll want to let it sit out for about 45 minutes, just like this, with it plugged in, and it should start into a full boil. I'm talking rolling boil, steam being produced. If it's just getting warm, that could mean that it's not bringing the water to a full boil and not working properly. So you want to let it sit for 45 minutes and make sure it comes to a full boil. Also, you'll want to check at this point is on your heating element here is a rubber gasket for your heating element. This can sometimes leak. So while you're letting it sit out and running the boiling tank test, you'll also want to check to make sure if water is leaking out of here as it sits out. If water is leaking here, again, it's not being fully boiled, it's not moving into your glass jar, that could account for your loss of production. After all of that, if your heating element is working properly and no water is being leaked from here, what's probably happening is inside here is where your heating element plugs into the rest of the machine. It's this little power outlet in the back bottom here. That should be loose because it's going to allow this thing to connect in, and you'll want to, and if this is working properly, power's getting through, it's running for the full length of time, that means that that's not allowing power to get into the heating element during normal operation, and we need to replace that part back there. That's basically, if everything else works on this troubleshooting guide, that's probably your problem and your loss of production. So anything else, if you have any more problems or if there's something still going on and you can't figure it out, feel free to give us a call at 1-800-875-5915 and we'd be happy to help you troubleshoot with anything you may need. Thank you for watching this video and have a great day.